The NATO commander exposes the collapse that Trump predicted when speaking in Singapore about a fragmented world threatened by wars, sabotage, drones, undersea cables, Russian pressure, Chinese advances, and Western allies rushing to rearm. The warning came at the Shangri-La Security Forum and arrives this Tuesday, June 2, 2026. Like an uncomfortable confirmation for those who spent years criticizing Donald Trump for demanding more defense, more money, and more responsibility from the allies. Admiral Giuseppe Cavoldragoni did not speak as a television commentator. He, as chairman of the NATO Military Committee, the alliance's top military authority, made it clear that global security is now in a difficult phase. NATO now admits that it needs to prepare for war to preserve peace. So why was Trump dismissed as an alarmist when he demanded this before? If Europe now talks about defending itself alone, why did it spend so much time depending on the United States? If the collapse was so obvious, how did they pretend to be surprised for so long? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward and no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. Dragoni did it. He warns him in Singapore in front of military authorities, defense ministers, and representatives from several nations. He stated that the world is fragmenting, that the stability of recent decades is cracking, and that adversaries are exploiting this weakness on several fronts. The commander mentioned the militarization of space, cyber warfare, information manipulation, economic dependence used as a weapon, and the return of large-scale conventional war in Europe. It was not a common speech. It was the portrait of an alliance realizing too late that the time of comfort is over. That's where Trump appears at the center of the debate without needing to be on stage. For years, he pressured NATO allies to increase their military spending and to stop treating the United States as free insurance. The old diplomatic elite called this rudeness, isolationism, and an attack on the alliance. Now NATO itself admits that money on paper doesn't deter anyone. Dragone was straightforward in saying that you don't deter an enemy by waving money in the air. It's necessary to turn investment into real capability, into battalions, ships, ammunition, industry, technology, and readiness. That sentence sums up the demand Trump made when he said that allies needed to pay more and rely less on the American taxpayer. The meeting in Singapore showed a profound change within the West itself. The discussion is no longer just about tanks in Europe or about promises made at international summits. Trump saw this political fragility before many leaders admitted it in public. The Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles reinforced this same view when speaking at the same forum. He warned that the seabed has become a battleground and mentioned attacks and damage. Australia, Marles, the defense minister, reinforced this at the forum. He mentioned disputes, attacks, and damages. Australia depends on just 15 submarine cables for about 99% of its international internet traffic. This is not just a theory. This is the new silent war. Marles also said that 98% of the goods traded by Australia go through ports. The defense minister of Australia, Marles, warned about disputes and attacks. He emphasized that more than 40% of the defense budget is being allocated to maritime capabilities. This decision shows that serious nations have already understood the message. Sovereignty is not defended with pretty speeches. Sovereignty is defended with ships, radar, satellites, submarines, drones, intelligence, and industrial capability. It's exactly the kind of world that Trump described when he called for strength, borders, national production, and more responsible allies. Europe has also begun to admit the mistake. The Prime Minister of Denmark, Mette Frederiksen, said that Europeans reduced military spending after the Cold War and believed that if something happened, the United States would come to help. That's a serious admission. It shows that part of Europe treated Washington as a permanent bodyguard while keeping up polished rhetoric about the international order. When Trump demanded that each ally carry their share, the reaction was hysteria. Now the European leaders themselves are talking about full rearmament, self-defense, and the ability to protect borders. The tension over Greenland also fits into this picture. Denmark reacts to Trump's statements because it knows that the Arctic has become a real area of dispute. The region has military, mineral, energy, and strategic value. Russia and China are looking at the Arctic with growing interest. Maritime routes, bases, sensors, critical minerals, and military presence make Greenland much more than just a distant territory. When Trump brings up this subject, the media treats it as a provocation. When generals and ministers talk about security in the Arctic, they call it strategy. The difference lies in the discomfort that Trump causes by bringing the issue up without the diplomatic gloss. NATO has already set a goal of 5 out of 3% of GDP for defense and security by 2035, with 3.5% for core defense and 1.5% for infrastructure, networks, civil readiness, innovation, and the industrial base. This goal didn't come about because the world became calmer. It came about because the alliance realized that the threat became more expensive, faster, and more widespread. The bill has come due. Europe can no longer pretend that 2% was enough to face Russia, China, Iran, maritime sabotage, cyber warfare, and large-scale drone attacks. Ukraine adds another factor: drones. Volodymyr Zelensky said he still hopes for a major drone deal with the United States and that he needs Trump's approval to move forward. Kyiv wants to offer field experience gained in the war against Russia, while American companies have artificial intelligence and advanced technology. This combination could create one of the biggest technological warfare deals in the world. That's the difference between leadership and submission. The old foreign policy accepted long, expensive, and confusing commitments, often without demanding clear concessions in return. Trump works with pressure. He asks who pays, who produces, who benefits, who takes the risk, and what is the advantage for the United States. In the case of Ukrainian drones, the question isn't whether technology matters. It matters a lot. The question is whether Washington will keep making deals like an ATM, or if it will negotiate as a power that knows the value of its own market, its own industry, and its own artificial intelligence. Dragonet's warning also puts Putin at the center of the equation. Russia uses drones, missiles, sabotage, information warfare, and energy pressure to test the Western response. Zelensky said that Moscow watches NATO's reaction when drones head toward Romania, Moldova, Poland, or the Baltic nations. This shows that the boundary of the war is not static. Putin measures weakness, measures response time, measures political fear. When he finds hesitation, he advances. When he finds strength, he recalculates. Trump has always understood this language of power better than the bureaucrats who thought an official statement could restrain a dictator. China appears on the other side of the same equation. The Indo-Pacific faces maritime pressure, technological competition, and militarization. The South China Sea, Taiwan, undersea cables, and trade routes are on the radar of all nations that depend on global trade. Australia is not investing in submarines, frigates, destroyers, and maritime surveillance on a whim. It's doing this because it knows that the dispute with Beijing won't be won with naivety. Trump put China at the center of American politics when many people still saw Beijing as a harmless trade partner. Today, ministers and generals express the same concern in different words. The old establishment tries to turn all this into criticism of Trump because they can't stand to admit that he was right in his assessment. What is happening now is a race for real capability. NATO will pressure allies to meet higher targets. Europe will expand factories, munitions, air defense, and drones. Australia will strengthen maritime surveillance and critical infrastructure. And Trump, at the center of this pressure, will have a strong card in his hand. The world that tried to mock him is now speaking the language he put on the table. I'm Milson Alves, globalist, international affairs expert, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves global community.